Okay, so we might get started. This session is on should I farm carbon on my property? I'll just start by giving a little bit of introduction. So my name is Dorianne Coventry. I work with my colleague Hamish Webb, who's here. We are delivering the AgTech Gateway project for the SRI. So for those who don't know, the SRI is a Smart Region Incubator based just here at the UNE. And the purpose of the incubator is to support startups in the region. Our project, the AgTech Gateway project, is to support up to 25 AgTech startups in the New England Northwest to scale and grow their businesses both in Australia and globally. Thank you for coming. We're really delighted today to have an opportunity to connect some of our AgTech startups. We're going to hear from two of our AgTech startups. I'll introduce everybody in a minute, with the community and helping to explore how the startups that are coming out of the AgTech Gateway program and the SRI can help the community, can help agriculture, and vice versa. So how we can all work together to progress agriculture, especially in this really exciting topic of the environment and the carbon credit market. Ooh. Now, this is our third carbon credit event. We had two last year. This is a learning process for me, certainly, and for many of us. It's a new industry. It's a very large industry. So in Australia alone, the carbon market is valued at approximately $5 billion, and globally, it's estimated to be worth $82 billion. So it is a large market. We know that there is potential for producers to be able to diversify their income by accessing the carbon credit market. But like I said, it's still a new area. There are upfront costs. And certainly from the last carbon credit session, my question was, it looks to me like we can make money out of it, but that not everybody will. And is it worth it for us individually to take the upfront cost to do our baseline measurement, and will we make money out of that investment? So that's what we wanted to explore next in today's session, which is, should I farm carbon on my property? We're here today to hear from two of our founders, Sam Duncan from Farm Lab and Milton Kirkpatrick from Precision Pastures. And then we have Norman and Greg from Australian Soil Management at the end. Sam is the founder and CEO of Farm Lab. Farm Lab helps agronomists and farmers make better decisions regarding inputs and land management by cheaply and accurately visualizing their soil. Sam is a father, an entrepreneur, and a passionate environmentalist. Milton is the founder and CEO of Precision Pastures. Yeah, everybody knows Milton, I think. Using spatial technology tools, Precision Pastures' aim is to provide strategic soil analysis services and science-based land and productive pasture management advice. All carbon farming projects require practical services and analysis. Precision Pastures have been providing these services and integrating with the latest soil technologies in the carbon market. Then next we have Norman. Norman is a results-focused director with a reputation for building, so he's from ASM, or Australian Soil Management, pardon me. He's a results-focused director with a reputation for building new businesses to support worthwhile causes at a national and international level. His property in Australia's high country is a sanctuary for rescue horses and is also a biodiversity reserve. Norman has developed international markets for carbon credits generated by Australian farmers and other land managers. And then we have Greg, who's also a director at Australian Soil Management. Greg is one of Australia's most experienced and knowledgeable scientists in the field of carbon farming. He is passionate about smarter land management, meaning the integration of sophisticated natural systems with modern farming practices to build better soils, landscapes, and businesses. Greg has developed and commercialized a range of environmentally friendly products now available globally. So today, the way things are going to work today is we're going to hear from each of our speakers. They'll speak for about 10 minutes each, and then we'll sit and have a question and answer panel. We have people who have Zoomed in from actually all over the world for this session. So it's very exciting. For those who are on Zoom, if you do have a question, if you can please just put it in the chat box at the end of the presentations. We'll check the chat box and let you ask the questions or help you ask questions. When we do have question and answer time, if you just put your hand up, I'll bring the mic around to you so that people on Zoom can hear what the questions are. So that's enough for me. I'm going to pass things over to Sam to get started. We're looking forward to the presentation, guys. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Dorianne. I've got that. Hopefully everyone on Zoom can hear me okay. Looks like we've got about 20 people. It's fantastic. So as Dorian, thank you for that fantastic introduction. As Dorian said, my name's Sam Duncan. I'm from a company called FarmLab. Here to talk today about carbon, and I'll tell you why we're interested in carbon in a second. If I can just make sure this works. So, there we go. So a bit of background about us. FarmLab started in 2016 as a solution to the problem, how do we link soil carbon to profitability? Had a passion for carbon sequestration, and it came down to one of the fundamental issues with soil carbon, which is how do you manage what you measure if you're not measuring it and you're not recording it. So in 2017, we built a mobile app to help farmers take soil tests. And the entire point of that was to digitize soil samples and build a system for soil samples to be fed in. Not to be used straight away, more so to be built up over time so that farmers, agronomists and land managers could look back in time and have a look at the changes throughout their soil. The fundamental goal of being able to link those changes and things like soil carbon to productivity, to yield, to the bottom line. Because we fundamentally think that if there's a market for this, if we can link this to profitability, we can convince more farmers to do it. Although that's not always the case, and I think I'm talking to a few farmers in the room who probably aren't just doing it for the bottom line results, and that's fantastic. And we'll go into more around the other results shortly.
Sam, can I just ask you, can you check if your mic is on? There's no audio.
Yeah, that's great. I might have to use the. I might touch that. Yeah. How's that? Yeah, cool. So in 2019, we built what we call a web app, which is just a piece of mapping software that helps our users map their soil test results back across their farm. We built that in conjunction with the University of Sydney Soil Science Department under a Landcare Smart Farming Partnerships grant. That's still ongoing today, and there's some really exciting tools coming out of that, that will be coming out of that over the next, next year, next 1 to 2 years. And that's what it looks like there. So this is kind of the end result. This is where we're at today. So what you see here is a farmer's farm. This is all sort of live, real data. So we can see the soil carbon percentage through the soil tests that were taken across this farm. However, and I'll just caveat this with, this farmer didn't go out to deliberately measure carbon. They were actually doing it for agronomic reasons. So the farmer wanted to understand where to crop, where to graze. It was a new investment for them, and they just wanted to understand the soil across the farm. The outcome, however, because when you take a soil test, you get 100 different measurements on it, was we also had a soil carbon measurement there. And this is fantastic. And we'll come back to why and how this can be used in the future. But this is more, the point of showing this is to highlight the importance of soil data and visualizing that soil data at the end of the day. So why carbon? And that's kind of why we're here today. To answer the question, should I farm carbon on my property? I think the answer to that question is a yes. I think no, we're not. I don't want to spoil the workshop for you today, but of course. But it's more about why and what you get out of it and how you get that out of it. So I put up the slide because we always talk about soil carbon in terms of yield, and yield is kind of that bottom line profit driver, right? But that's only one, and yes, soil carbon will help you improve yield, but so will NPK, so will water, so will a whole bunch of factors there, right? So why specifically focus on soil carbon? Well, there's this other thing called resilience, and resilience is a term being bandied around quite a bit today in terms of agriculture. Soil carbon, it can be really strongly linked to resilience. What is resilience? Resilience is the ability for a farm, for a business, for soil to bounce back in relation to shocks, things like droughts, compaction, all sorts of factors that impact the soil itself and the bottom line. And this is really, when we talk about the benefits that soil carbon have for the farm, it's all about resilience. It's about being able to get through that next drought without having to eat too much into the profits or the bottom line of the business. Soil and resilience is often linked with natural capital. And this is another term that you'll hear over and over again. It's getting a lot of traction at the moment. I think we ran the first natural capital conference here in Australia last year. I don't know if anyone went to that. Unfortunately, we missed out on it, but they'll be running it again this year. And there's a lot of interest in this concept of natural capital. It's not just about soil, but soil carbon is a really key contributor to natural capital over a farm. And it's a really important concept. There's been a lot written about it, and in particular, a lot about how soil carbon can add to that sort of natural capital. And bringing it back to resilience, really, high levels of natural capital often offer farmers with the ability to be more resilient in the face of droughts, in the face of shocks to that system. So when we talk about why you should farm soil carbon, it all comes back to that resilience, that resilience over the long term and the ability to improve your natural capital. So like I said, this is, very much an emerging field. There's still a lot of work to be done in actually assessing that natural capital. One of the other really important things when it comes to soil carbon and measuring soil carbon is that here in Australia, we have a really fantastic, a lot of guidelines on how to take those measurements, and Milton will talk about those shortly. But that in itself is, I guess, the starting point to measuring that natural capital. So whilst the scientists and there's many businesses out there trying to value natural capital holistically across not just soil but the entire operation. We start with soil because we know how to measure it and we know how to manage. Well, we now knowing how to, or building up new ways to manage it, and soil carbon in particular. So it's a really good starting point. And as this natural capital discussion evolves, if you're measuring your soil carbon, you're already a step ahead when it comes to getting into the conversation. Options. So I thought I might outline a couple of the options here in Australia when it comes to measuring carbon. I've cut this pretty crudely, but this kind of builds on the last couple of workshops. The last couple of workshops have really focused on the Emissions Reduction Fund, but I thought it might be worth bringing in option 2 as well, which is interesting. So option 1, Emissions Reduction Fund. I'm not going to labour on too much about and this is really for Australia, the Australian Emissions Reduction Fund, but I will say it's high cost, but it can be high reward. So this is all about Australian carbon credits, measuring and baselining soil carbon, and then improving that over time. The next lot of speakers will go into a lot more depth about that and talk about some of the success stories around, in their experience around carbon credits. The key thing I want to outline to you is when selecting consultants. So the challenge with Emissions Reduction Fund and Australian carbon credits is it's not so much a challenge, but the risk is that they are closely linked to, it's a financial tool, it's a financial mechanism to, that you can take advantage of, which is fantastic. It's why we have them. But the risk there is that you are outlying, a fair bit of cost to get into this program as well. So just make sure you do your due diligence. If you're a farmer, if you're listening to us online, it's kind of like selecting an accountant or a financial planner. Make sure, well, we've got 2 key things up here. Make sure the people you're talking to have a track record. So ask to see some of their projects, and Australian Soil Management, part of bringing them up to date so they can talk about a bit of their history as well. And transparency. You want to know how the financial planner and how the carbon consultant generate their revenue. Is it through a cut of the carbon credits? Is it through fees? How does that operate? Because that will provide some clarity into their business model. Hopefully help you, along your journey and understanding what's out there. And bottom line, do your due diligence. And option 2. So this is the little term I took from, so my background is actually Air Force. I spent 12 years in Air Force before coming into this. And we have this term called Lone Ranger, which is where we send people out by themselves on a mission to do something. Now, this concept we're kind of bringing into the carbon farming space is sort of option 2, which is what a lot of people currently are doing who aren't involved in the emissions reduction fund in improving carbon. It's a fantastic mechanism. There's lots of flexibility because, you assess the results yourself. You do the testing yourself, and you do it in line with your profit, your revenue, and the amount you have to spend on doing it. The key thing here is, you'll do this if you want to explore the mechanisms to increase soil carbon across your farm or land, and that's really the key thing here. Is that soil carbon increases are based on climate, they're based on all these sort of localized features. And so you really want to make sure, when you're picking up and you approach to improving soil carbon, that it's going to work in your area. Second here is that, you might use this if you or your agronomist have a good grasp on soil data. So this is, I can't stress this enough. If you're going to go out and improve soil carbon through your own mechanisms, please record it, because it's a fantastic way to then have that conversation with the scientific community. It doesn't have to be recorded in line with the Emissions Reduction Fund methodology, which is incredibly complex because you're not taking advantage of those carbon credits. But if you do some baselining, if you just do a transect, take a few transect samples across each paddock that you're improving, that's a fantastic starting point. And that you can use that, in a couple of years' time to look back and measure your own success, really. And the last one there, you want to increase resilience in natural capital. And so this is about you experimenting with what's going to help you in your climate, in your region, with your resources. And, just bringing that natural capital thing back in. So if you've assessed it, you'll be able to understand what works for you. And what levels of soil organic carbon you want to get to really reinforce that natural capital. I've got a little matrix there. The bottom line on that matrix is probably revenue realisation and flexibility. Emissions reduction fund projects not that flexible. You work with the project manager, you come up with a plan. I'll let Australian Soil Management talk about that in more detail. But the revenue realisation over the long term can be quite high because you take advantage of those carbon credits. On the other hand, that Lone Ranger soil carbon improvement, very flexible. Revenue realisation, I haven't said low, it's actually kind of medium, because if you're improving that resilience to shocks, we're all going through this at the moment. We've just faced the worst drought in the last, in recorded history here in Australia, and we're probably, I don't know if we're over it yet, but it's there's a lot of smiles in the room. So we've had some great rainfall here in New England for those on Zoom. So hopefully we're through it. But this will help you improve that bottom line over the long term. But it's about making sure you have that long term approach to revenue and to soil carbon. So the approach, if you're new, start with a few soil tests, or look at your historic soil tests. Look at what things you might have done in the past to improve soil carbon, and whether or not they worked, because then that'll give you some confidence around what you can do and before you step into an emissions reduction fund project. When you're confident, look at a soil carbon project, but do your homework. So talk to the consultants, get a bit of feedback from multiple consultants, figure out what works in your area. And if you're really confident, if you've done this over the past 5, 10, 15 years, and you know what works in your climate, with your farm, with your budget, that's fantastic. I think you'd be more than ready to jump into the emissions reduction fund. So that's it from me. I'm going to shut up now and hand over to Milton to talk about it in a bit more detail. So we'll just change over slides, so just bear with us for 5 seconds. You take that. I'll switch
Yes, that's it.
That's so you need to you probably need to click to go through the left mouse button.
Left mouse.
Give that a go. Yeah. So use that left mouse button.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be here when it's green and damp outside, and it's amazing how the whole persona of everybody has been improved. It's wonderful. So let me just enter into this conversation by saying that we started up Precision Pastures 5 years ago as a tool for, and as a business primarily, but as a tool for ensuring that some of the spatial technology and some of the research that was being done in this place, in the university in particular, was being transformed into what was happening in the paddocks. So that was the challenge for us. We were going to be using spatial technology tools to map the variability of the soils over farms and within farms. So since then, it's been mostly grid sampling, generally on a 2 hectare grid at 0 to 10. So we've just been doing the topsoil measurements. And in this area, it's been mostly measurements for phosphorus, sulfur and pH. They're the main limiting factors as we see them in this area. We've done some deep core sampling, mostly by hand, to complement what we're doing on with the topsoil. And we've developed treatment calculators and timelines and variable rate prescriptions for the spreading contractors that are adopting variable rate technology. Their rigs are set up for it, it's just a matter of unlocking them. And we've also been doing some EM38 surveys, electromagnetic surveys, and soil variability over those 5 years it's real. It's known. You can take 2 steps and the soil can change within those 2 steps. So, and it tends to be zonal, as you can see on the right there. What we got, 5, 6 zones in a paddock for Colwell P. So we're taking individual samples at those points and zoning them up. On the left, there's an image of the variation in soil conductivity over a centre pivot area. So, it's obvious that it is zonal, and it gives us opportunities to target treatments and the amelioration, particularly with lime, so that we can get some cost benefit out of it. We're not putting out fertiliser, we're not doing treatments, we're not managing the properties on a blanket overall fashion. We're targeting it to those zones. Oops. Going the wrong way. Can we go back? Back to?
Excuse me. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me, but those of us on Zoom can't see the active screen.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Is that okay? Must be.
Not
No
apparent.
news is good news.
We're seeing Farm Lab still.
Oh. Keep going.
Yeah, that's great. We've got it now.
Okay, so soil sampling is the crux of what we do, and we've learned a few lessons over that time, over the last 5 years. But generally, our sampling is being done with an auger rather than a push probe, because we're only going down 0 to 10. Generally, it's been on a 2 hectare grid, and the 2 hectare grid is the best we can do on a 40 hectare paddock. If we go under 40 hectares, we have to bring the size of the grid down so we get definition. And of course, GPS is a fundamental part of what we do. It's also targeted, and we're able to target where we put the sample holes down by not only a grid, but by using the EM38 images, NDVI, which is the measurement of the vegetation, and gamma zones as well. So there are tools available as to where you might locate sample positions, sample sites. So this is all transposed now into soil carbon baseline sampling. We're getting considerable inquiry lately, in particular, as to whether or not we can function in this area. The answer is yes, but there are some interesting factors associated with that. Sorry. Okay, so soil organic carbon baseline sampling. Subject to what Sam was talking about, in that there's the high road and there's the low road. I'm assuming here that you're probably going to go the high road. We can talk about the low road later if you like, but it's all as per the Carbon Credits Carbon Farming Initiative measurement of soil carbon sequestration in agricultural systems methodology determination 2018. And I can hand up the big booklet if you like. But anyway, it's there. And let me just run through a few of the factors that do stand out in this that we should consider. It does rain, doesn't it? And it is cold. Welcome to Ebor. So we have to be sampling at a depth greater than the soil source for land management activity. So if you've got pastures going down to, 600 or 700, 60 centimetres, 70 centimetres down to a metre, technically you probably should go down to a metre to collect your samples. But we'll go into that a little bit more later. There is a need for 2 sampling rounds in the first reporting period. So baseline sampling and a subsequent sampling round, generally at the end of a 12-month period. It has to be conducted by an independent person with sampling experience. So, if you're employing a consultant to do it, or you're doing it yourself, you actually have to have an independent person with sampling experience. And I'll give you a business card if you like. There are carbon estimated areas, estimation areas. Everyone familiar with this? Have you talked about this in the previous ones? Okay. So a carbon estimated area is, you define an area on your property. Say if you had a 300 hectare property, I'd say rule of thumb, you'd probably select 2. So you'd have 140 or 100 hectares, 140, that'd have to be, perhaps Greg and Norman can help me with that. Shout out from the, if I'm wrong, but.
Will depend on statistical leanings.
Yeah.
In terms of property size. If you've got 1,000 hectares,
yeah,
you can't have one carbon estimation area.
Yeah.
Within the area, you could divide it into strata.
Strata.
And then from each strata, you've got to take a minimum of 3 cores,
yep,
A, B, and C, and the
yep,
A's get
yep,
all of them put into one, and you come up with an average for your
yeah, it's all right. We'll come to that, Norman, right? You're stealing my thunder. Right, and the cores have to be a minimum of 38 millimetres. We're not allowed to use augers, and there's to be no lubricants other than water. There are strict GPS positioning criteria. It has to be under 4 metres in accuracy. And there's comprehensive paperwork, although Sam cringes at that thought. We'll get that down to electronic pretty much 100% within a very short time. There has to be photo evidence as you go. But there is some flexibility in the sites. If you do hit you know, a big boulder, or you hit a, you know, the topsoil the bedrock comes to the surface, you've got up to 5 metres to move. But the auditor is hanging and hovering over you at the same time. So, yep, go. So there's a design. Firstly, we have to have a sampling plan. So you have to consider the number of samples per carbon estimation area, and that's probably determined pretty much on what you can afford. How much soil organic carbon variability is there across the project area? So that's going to help you define where your what your sampling plan is, where your estimation area is, and where your strata areas are. So each carbon estimation area is stratified. So generally, I would imagine it has to be 3 or more stratas per area. And you have, the stratas can be equal in area or they can be unequal in area, but they can't overlap. So if you look over to the left of the screen, and I know it's on its side, but that's the best way I could put it, is that that's the, if you look down here, you can see that there's the sampling for the first sampling RAM. If they're equal, they're equal. You can change it to unequal in the second year or the second round, but if you go back to the equal areas for the third round, you're able to still composite the samples. In other words, if you're collecting one, say 3 or 5 samples within a strata, you can actually put them together and call it one. If it's unequal, you can't do that. You have to have them tested individually. The locations, they really need to be determined before you go out to do the extractions. They need to be located with lat long to 5 decimal point places, and the sample locations are usually determined using the pseudo random number generator. Google it. So as an aside there, that's where you probably need, if you don't have that capacity, to employ a consultant to do it for you. Because I can't do it. If I'm going out to do the sampling, I have to go to those points that have been determined by someone else. And there have to be at least 3 sample locations per stratum. With the extraction of the cores, there's a minimum of 30 centimetres as a single core. So we can go down to 30 centimetres, but that has to be predetermined. But if you can go to a metre, that's great. If you can go to plus 30 plus, that's great. But in that case, you have to take a test of the 0 to 30 and then a test of the rest. Sorry? No augers, push probe. They need to be intact. And hang on, can you go back one? No, sorry, I'm coming up to that. I'll come to that, all right? So same depth within each area, except with this bedrock. And it all has to be noted. Minimum core of the device, 38 millimetres, and all cores have to be taken within 60 days. Sample preparation and the analysis. So it's a matter of determining whether the test is on the 0 to 30 and or the 30 to greater than 30. Individual or composite samples for the testing. So as I was saying before, if you've got equal points, equal areas of your stratas, you can use a composite sample, test the composite sample. Otherwise, you're doing individuals. Right. So the current challenges, and I need to reflect probably on the New England because that's where we've done our work. You can see there's a push, like a tube core, and it's supposed to be an intact core out at Ebor a couple of weeks ago. And that's our challenge. One of our big challenges is that we've got rocks. If we haven't got rocks, we've got clay. And I'll invite anyone that'd like to come out and push clay out of a tube. We didn't swear, did we? No. Okay. Right. So there's limited equipment options, and you know I think we might be getting there, but it's going to be a challenge. So, watch this space. The sample field management, in other words, the data collection and documenting of it is pretty old hat. It's all longhand. So Sam's through FarmLab, we're working very quickly to get that down to electronic as we go. And the sampling site selections. That's the case of last week. We had lots of contemplation about some of the sites. So, next. That pretty much covers it. I hope, and as I said, the book's that thick, but I would like to say though, those, there are a few of my clients in this room now that do have some comprehensive data on soil carbon that they've collected over particular paddocks over the last few years, and that may well help them in their, in their consideration of carbon. So there is currently we've just about got it over the line, and we haven't signed a contract yet, but we're nearly there. There's a new MDC project that's being conducted here in the Tablelands, and it's titled Grazing System Impact on Livestock Productivity, Soil Moisture and Soil Carbon. So in other words, that's the interaction of productivity, soil moisture and soil carbon, and how they relate to each other and how they benefit each other. So it's commencing in March, and it involves 10 producer demonstration sites, and it completes in September 2025. So the aim of that project is to demonstrate that the effective utilisation of the seasonal feed-based resource provide an opportunity for residual pasture to build soil carbon, soil organic matter, and thus improve water infiltration and water holding capacity, leading to increased production over time and increase the carbon stock. So it's all fairly relevant and pertinent to the current. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
I think so. Can you do this?
Thank goodness for you, Sam.
Yeah, I'll try.
Just check that.
Thanks, Sam. Okay. We've been at this business for about 8 years now, so I'll try and pass on some hard-won lessons. First of all, the first thing I'd like to talk about is mindset. So we find this is probably the most important factor in a carbon project. For example, the topic of the workshop, should I farm carbon on my property? Well, you already are farming carbon on your property. I mean, everything you produce is carbon, water and some minerals. So, and everything you produce has come from CO2 as a carbon source. So you think about it that way. So what we're asking you to do in a carbon project is slightly change the way you're managing the carbon and to be aware of the carbon and to store some of it in the soil rather than reduce the amount in the soil or maintain the current level. That's what I mean by mindset. It's just how you see things. Next slide, please. Well, so what we're trying to do here, we've lost about 50% of our soil carbon if you look at CSIRO publications and since settlement. So that's cost a lot of money because in losing half the carbon, you've lost productivity. And to a certain extent, it's been replaced with the introduction of fertilisers, better varieties, rotations, agronomic practices. But so the next step for us is to put that back, okay? So we've lost 50%. Let's put the 50% back. And this scheme that we're talking about now and this whole workshop is about how do you get paid for putting it back. The main game for us is productivity and profitability, not carbon credits. Even though we're in that business, the main game from a business point of view for the farmer is resilience, like Sam pointed out, which is really important, and maintaining a profitability and productivity. And the carbon payments are something, they're another financial product off your farm. And Norman will cover the details about how you manage it as a financial product. Okay, I covered that. We aim for a 3% soil carbon. I guess that's a rough target for a clay type soil, not for sand. You wouldn't do that in sand. And don't confuse, we often find that people confuse soil carbon with organic matter. So people say, I've got, my level of carbon is 5%. And I say, well, is that organic matter or is that carbon? So organic matter is about 50 to 60% carbon. So for 3% carbon there, you multiply that by 1.75 and you get the organic matter level. That's what the soil lab does. They do the carbon measurement, then they multiply it to give you an organic figure. So don't confuse them. The next one. This just gives you some samples of profiles. I mean, the one on the right is 1% carbon and the one on the left is 3% carbon. And you can see a difference in colour, you can see a difference in structure, crumbs, roots go down deeper, stores more moisture. So the big trick, or the big advantage with carbon, and as Sam said with resilience, is, you know, the rain, say you get 600 mils of rain, if it hits the soil, it goes straight in and it's stored there and it goes down the profile, that's terrific. But if you get 600 mils of rain and it runs off down your neighbour's place, you don't really get 600 mils of rain. So that's really important to know. It's all about, that's the resilience. Keep it where it lands. It was a big shock for me about 5 years ago. I think I went on to a farmer like this who's already doing it. And he says, my dams don't fill up anymore. You know, that's a good thing. You're not losing evaporation. Cover that. Next one, please. The approach we took, we're a bit different from other project developers, and we've invested a lot in research and development. So we've invested a lot of our own money over 8 years in probably 20 on-farm projects for research, not so much the carbon project, but do actual research. And we had grants from New South Wales government to matching funds. So what we're trying to do is work out what works and what doesn't work for carbon. On real farms, we do big strips, 20 hectare strips on cropping places. This is one of the regions, Riverina regions is one of our main regions out to Griffith. Out at Griffith, we did almond orchards, the Bortley's wines. We've tried increasing carbon on all sorts of businesses. Through to Wagga, which is mainly cropping and grazing, and up into the high country, and I'll cover that. Next one. And the other area is the capital region, so right down to the coast, up to Young, And now we find we're going up, our latest projects around Coonamble, and we're going down into Victoria now this year. There's been a lot of interest, and we're having to spend more time in the ute, basically. That's our office. So about 20 projects spread over that area. Is that next one? I'll give you 2 case studies out of all those. This is Bungendore. What we did here was improve fertility. This is an organic property. He's not certified organic, but he practices organic. And he's got rotational grazing. So what we've found here by over 3 years, we managed to increase, you can see the paddock on the left where we're working. We've got an extra 7% dry matter and a lot of increased biodiversity. So at 3 levels, you know, right from ground cover up to Phalaris, which is the tall one there. And you can see through the fence the difference. We have field days, education days on this. And the carbon here was almost a 1% increase, 0.9. But this is a really good soil to start with. And I think, I haven't got any evidence, but I think that these practices, like organic practices, tend to prime the soil, if you like. We tend to get a really fast response from those sort of soils. Whereas on the traditional high intensity places, set stocking takes more time. Next one. I thought, I've seen lovegrass around here. I thought I'd put lovegrass in. My old friend lovegrass. This is between Coomera and Canberra. It's about 80,000 hectares of lovegrass on grazing properties, and it's sending them broke. So the EPA asked us to look at the problem because the burning and all the other methods weren't working. So what we did was just say, let's increase the soil quality or health, fertility, and combine that with keeping the lovegrass short so it doesn't seed and the light gets to the ground. Let's see how we go. So next one. This is one of our trial strips with buffers between. That's lovegrass. Next one. That's after 3 years. What's happened there, we've got a 50% reduction in lovegrass, and we found it was replaced by native clovers and subclover. So by changing the fertility of the soil, you can encourage other plants. It's like managing from the ground up. And keeping it short, lovegrass short, so the light. So the seed bank was a really important thing here. That's granite soil, quite poor. We got a slower response there. In the basalt soil, about 30 k away from that, everything was a year to 2 years faster. Yeah. We had a mulcher. Yep. So the basalt soil, we got the DPI to do all our plant counts for this. Is an independent plant count. And in the basalt soil, we got another 18 species turn up from the seed bank. And he said, oh, you must have planted them. We didn't sow anything here. So that was very interesting. Oh, this is just some of the counts. You can see percentage plant type, lovegrass 57 down to 27. And the big increase in the legumes here, native clovers and subclover. Next one. And soil changes, like the carbon went from 1.3 to 1.9. It's still lower than we like. This is a granite soil, but it's still a good figure. That's worth doing in terms of carbon credits. I won't go through all the details on that. We don't just analyse carbon, we look at everything. We look at total nutrients, nutrient availability, the whole lot. Next one. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
So now that you're thinking about managing carbon, where is the economic opportunities going to come from? Well, this is a very new market, and even as we speak, the opportunities are expanding rapidly. So the first thing is to take advantage of carbon. Basically, you've got to register your farm as a soil carbon project. Unfortunately, that's through the government, which means bureaucracy. And in registering, there is an awful lot of detail that goes into it, including things like police checks to make sure that you're a fair and decent person and that you don't have a huge criminal record and all those sort of things. It also means that you've got to prove that you own the land. So whether it's in a family trust, or private company or in your own personal name, all of that proof has to go into it. Then it gets into cadastral boundaries and things like that. So once you get registered, that means you are now almost ready to go. You have to establish what your baseline on carbon is and the process you go through. So once you've got it established and it's all gone into the regulator in Canberra, you're ready to go. So what should you be thinking about? Well, the first and the one process that everyone knows about is what the government calls a reverse auction. You can bid with the government that you will sell them a certain amount of carbon at a certain price. The problem with this system is this system was designed to keep the price of carbon as low as possible because they want the emitters like BP, Chevron and all the other coal and petroleum-based companies to be paying the lowest possible price for what they have to do. So it's a system. The methodology is great. So Australia is one of the first countries. We love it because it gives the market confidence that this system is genuine and it's measurement based. With the auction, the problem with it is quite often you will have a contract with the government that you will deliver carbon in maybe 5 years' time when your soils have produced enough carbon to meet the contract volume that you have committed to. But we know in 5 years' time, the price will be so much higher. So it's the only system we know where you're given a price and delivering in the future when the price is going to be so much higher. You can avoid that, but it all comes down to the risk side of it. So leaving the government auction alone, and the price at the government auction will be currently around $15.50. In 5 years' time, the price will be $25 or $26. Every time that you hear a government or a big company saying, we are going to be carbon neutral by 2030 or 2050, what does that do? That bumps the price up and up and up. So if you're going to be a carbon farmer, clap every time you hear someone say, we're going to be carbon neutral. Because where are they going to get the credits from? Soil carbon's going to be one of the biggest. So there's a secondary market. Instead of dealing with the government, you can deal directly with the emitters. People like BP and others, they're already paying a much higher price. So currently they're probably paying around $17. And there is what they call a spot market where you can just put your credits into an area and people bid for them. So that's about $17.30. The problem also comes where overseas markets are much higher. So if you were selling produce into Europe or into South Korea, in Europe the price is currently $38 a credit. These are all Australian dollars. And in South Korea, the current price is $47 a credit. So we can sell overseas. What's to stop us? You have a contract overseas, a contact, and you can develop a contract. If you're a beef producer, why not sell your beef with a carbon credit overseas? In Europe, in probably 5 or 6 years' time, we know the price is going to be 60. So this is where the markets are going. You can create your own market. And there's a great example down in the Mornington Peninsula where a group has got together. It's a local farming community. And in the middle of the farming community is a ferry up market cafe. And they are telling all their customers that their coffee and their business is carbon neutral. And how they get the carbon neutral status is they look at their energy, their water and waste. And on those calculations, they can turn it into, they need to purchase a certain number of carbon credits to have that carbon neutral status. And they're purchasing the carbon credits directly from the farmers at $25 currently. They don't rely on a government methodology. They're not relying on anything. This is between the cafe and the farmer. This is where you can create your own markets. So the opportunities are expanding. You just need to be aware of it. So let's talk about what can be achieved. If we work on a target of 1%, everyone goes 1%, that's not very much. 1% soil carbon is huge. If you can get a 1% soil carbon increase, we're talking about 122 credits per hectare. And if you take the current price of around $15, $16, and you've got 1,000 hectares, we are talking about a net $1.8 million. If you take a price of $20, you're talking about a 2.3 net million, and go up to $30, which in 5 or 10 years is where this price will be heading. You're talking about $3.5 million. You're talking about getting up to the price of the land to purchase. That's the figures that you're talking about. Now, there are various ways that you can do it. There are brokers who will take a lot of the pain out of this. They'll say they'll pay for the registration and they'll pay for organising everything. All you have to pay for is probably the baseline. But they're going to only offer you maybe a fraction more than half of the credits. So if you're looking at a figure of $3 million, they're saying, oh, we'll do everything for free, which is good, but you're not getting the big payment. And so as a result of that, we were never in this area of being brokers, and we're not brokers because we'll tell you we're not financial advisors. But what we have done is said, well, this is not the way we see it should be done. So we do it by getting you to pay for the cost of registration, the cost of organising the sampling, the cost of the auditors. You pay for everything, but all the credits are in your name and you get them all. Because we have other skills that are helpful in this area, where we make our money is by saying, well, our job is to get you the best price we can think of, where we can find it. And our cut of that is a 5% success fee. Now, if you don't like success fees, we can organise a front-up payment, whatever way you want to do it. But that's a different model. But we do have caveats because we need you to be successful. We need to be absolutely certain that you are going to stick to what's called the farm management plan. It's part of the methodology that says you've got to say how you're going to meet the additionality clauses. So you've got to be doing something new. You can't just be business as usual. It's got to be something new. Now, that can come in quite a few different areas. It could be something as simple as if you've never used gypsum, and that would be a tick in terms of eligibility. If you've never used compost, that could be a tick in terms of eligibility. Using fertiliser could be a tick, but gee, what farm hasn't used fertiliser in the last 30 years? So that one's a bit harder. There's other things when it comes into cropping. You can do different things on cropping. So there's a number of things that you can tick to make you eligible for it. Depth of soil sampling is crucial because roots don't stop at 30 centimetres. 30 is the minimum that says in. So if you are able to get a 1% increase in your soil organic carbon in the 0 to 30 centimetres, what that basically means is you probably got 1.6, 1.7% increase. Because the 30 to 60, you'll probably have a 0.5 increase there, and the 60 to 100, you're probably going to be getting a little bit. So instead of 1%, you've suddenly find yourself with 1.6%. That's worth a lot of money. But whatever you start with, that's what you've got to finish with all the times. So if you go 0 to 30 at the beginning, you've just lost. You've got to stick to that. So some of the things that you want to be thinking about in terms of building soil carbon is the two things you really want: root mass. So you want roots that are going down deep, and biodiversity and things like that, because it all has a role to play. With choosing your advisors, there are risks with every strategy. You need to be aware of all the risks involved. So with building soil carbon, you can build it quickly or you can build it slowly. It will depend on your budget and what you're prepared to do. If you're building it quickly, what's the cost? Because at the moment, if you wanted to build it quickly and you were putting a lot of stuff on and it was costing you $600 a hectare, and you're only going to get offered $10 for a credit, you're getting $1,200 back. Is that a good business risk for you? In my opinion, I'd be careful on that one. I don't think it's good enough. You want a lot more if you're going to risk $600 a hectare. So there's some of the things that you need to be aware of when choosing which is the best approach for you. And one thing that we haven't mentioned is on the Lone Ranger style is you could do a soil carbon project where you register and you do the baseline, and they would be your only costs, and you could sit on it. Do nothing else. Just stick to what the management plan that you have, because as you build it, it's an asset. You're not selling it. And if you wanted to sell your farm in 10 years' time, you have carbon stocks there that are valuable, and it increases the value of your farm. So by doing a minimal approach, you can get benefit from it. So I will finish there.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there's quite a few questions coming from the audience. Would anyone, I'm just going to pull up also the questions here. Okay, looks like this is, yeah, they're all good now. So if there are any questions from people Zooming in, if you want to pop them in the chat group, we've got that open and we can address them. Are there any questions from the room? Hamish.
Thank you. Norm, you mentioned the different international markets and the very different pricing. How is that not an arbitrage opportunity for brokers or traders, is first question, to effectively buy Australian credits for $15 and sell them in Europe for 30? And the second question is, how is a Australian credit, surely there's a difference in the protocol, the systems, the authenticity of a credit in Australia versus somewhere else. If I'm buying just the cheapest credit in the international market, is that really doing the job that it was designed?
You've touched on the heart of many of these issues. Certainly, Australian credits are far more valuable. We believe that the future will also be that soil credits are going to be far more valuable than just carbon credits, because at the moment in industry, if you bring in a new piece of technology that reduces the amount of emissions that you put out, you get awarded those emission reductions as credits. Emissions reduction is going to do absolutely nothing in terms of climate change. Well, when you think of it logically, if there's 418 parts per million, parts per whatever carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, if you're continuing to add to it, okay, albeit you're slowing down the amount you're adding to it, how's that going to reverse anything? Whereas if you're sucking it out of what's called legacy carbon, if you're taking the legacy carbon out of the atmosphere and through photosynthesis in your plants, putting it in the soil, that's the only way you're going to change this. Now, that's recognised by scientists, it just hasn't come through into policy. So one of the things that we argue with the government about is soil carbon should be 10 times more valuable than every other carbon credit. So that's one part. With the selling overseas, yes, when it comes to money and things like that, people are always going to find ways to make more money for themselves. So purchasing credits here and selling them overseas, if people can do it, that's the way they'll do it. Which is why we would prefer that you look at it yourselves, develop your own contacts and look at those overseas markets, keep the middle people out of it. Because that's the only way you're going to control this and be able to manage it. So hopefully I've answered the questions.
So there's one other thing I'll just touch on there, which is the emissions reduction fund mechanism in Australia is world class. We are the furthest ahead when it comes to, and I know this is probably I'm happy to be argued with here, but the Australian ERF emissions reduction fund is world class when it comes to soil carbon improvements. We are some of the first people in the world to implement a soil carbon trading mechanism here in Australia, and I'm sure countries will start to follow, and some already are. But there was, we are just so far ahead of the game, and the reason for that is because of our scientists. They are the best in the world. In fact, the scientists that we work with at University of Sydney invented digital soil mapping, the ability to map and manage soils. And the reason for that is because we have such a small population over such a large area in Australia. And that in turn makes the ERF standards almost bulletproof when it comes to how carbon is measured and managed. So all of the stuff Milton spoke about sampling at depth, et cetera, that is best practice globally, not just here in Australia when it comes to measuring carbon. Now, because we've got that measurement piece down pat, it's now regulated. You will be, if you enter into an emissions reduction fund project or you just sample carbon in line with the ERF guidelines, light years ahead of, for example, the US or European markets when they come online, because they're not online now. And you will be in a fantastic position to trade carbon into those markets because they will trust us because of the science-backed approach we have to the emissions reduction scheme. So just my 2 cents there. I'm a big fan of the Australian ERF, and I think we shouldn't sell it short as far as what it is.
Thanks, guys. We've got a question from Sam Winfield. Can you explain the difference in verification standards? How can you get your soil carbon credited as international verified units and worth $38 to $47?
I'll hand over to you in a second. Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes back to what I was saying with the international market. So, you know, follow the ERF standards and do the baselining and then find that market. And I'll hand over to Norman about finding that market.
With the international areas, there has been some discussion at the UN and summits like that, where they are looking to regulate the ability for countries to trade credits. The issue that they have is they want to prevent people from double dipping. So you sell your credits overseas, who's keeping a record of it? And the same credits that you've just sold overseas, you're going to sell them to the government in Australia. So here is the fear that they have. And governments are very slow at developing these things, but there will be bilateral agreements on trading credits. When it's going to come in, I'm not sure. But you still don't need them. You can still sell your credits to whoever you like, as long as they're prepared to pay the price that you ask. So like everything at the moment, business is driving the whole change in this area. It's not governments, so we don't have to wait for them.
Thank you. We've got a question. I'll come to you next. We've just got a question at the back.
Thank you. Lorraine Gordon from the Regenerative Ag Alliance at Southern Cross University. Just a couple of points and questions. Coming off the back of the drought, which I'm not saying is finished yet, but it's actually a really good time to start measuring carbon. And I would just strongly encourage, for future financial benefit, if you are going to go down this path, that you actually do register. Because otherwise you could find that in 5 years' time, you actually have increased carbon you know, astronomically, and then you are on the backward step because you can't actually go back and get those carbon credits. So you actually got to do it from the day you register. So it's really important to register that you're going down this path. The second thing I was just going to make a comment about is the depth. And really it is, you're losing a lot by not going down to a metre. Like this 30 centimetres is just nonsense. Carbon will continue to draw down into 1.2, 1.5 metres. So it's just a waste of time if you can't get a really good depth when you start this measurement process. So any comments from the panel would be really good around those 2 points.
The panel's just saying they agree completely.
Milton talk about depth.
Look, I agree, Lorraine, wholeheartedly. If we can go to a metre, great. But the reality is that I'd love to put you on the end of the driver one day when you're trying to go beyond that 300 or 30 centimetres. But it's all about the decision making, the planning in the beginning. If you're putting your farm up as a, you know, you're putting in a sampling plan, you would have a pretty fair idea that you've got a metre that you can go to, or you can only go to 400 or 600. You know, it's all relative. So, yeah, ideally, we'd love every one of them to go to a metre without rocks, without, you know, inhibiting things. So.
Yeah, the challenge is, I mean, again, you'll know your farm and you'll know which areas you have, you can get down to a metre on. We are working on some technology to be able to help with the carbon estimation areas and determine whereabouts in those estimation areas we may not be able to get down to a metre. I think aspirationally go for a metre and then work with figure out where you're not likely to get to a metre, because if we can't sample to a metre, the roots probably can't get down there. You know, there's no use sampling bedrock. But yes, agreed. I think aim for a metre.
Sorry, so you're done? Sorry.
Thank you, Dorianne. 2 questions. Firstly, for the panel, is there a future market as well as a spot market, or is it only the spot market that's trading? And second question for Norm is, you spoke about the management practice that is required to change. Is that change a part of the emissions reduction scheme, and does that have to occur or be illustrated when you baseline, when you register, or at a later stage?
To register, you develop a fire management plan. And in that fire management plan, you specify what the eligible management activity is that you're going to undertake. So that's part of the registration. Along the way, the bureaucrats have added a few things like you got to then bring in an independent reviewer who looks at your fire management strategy and verifies that in their opinion that this management and what you're planning to do is going to be able of building carbon. So once you've registered and the Clean Energy Regulator comes back and says, yes, you're now registered, the first things you look at doing is your baselining. So you come up with the plans, you do your baseline, you establish what your average carbon level is for your farm. You are now ready to start on your eligible management activity. So whatever it is, that's when this part is finished, you then start on it, never before. No, there isn't a future market in terms of carbon. There is a spot market. But when you look at a lot of the electricity brokers and people like that, they are not in this market yet. So when they start to come in, you're going to get probably variety, and those markets will evolve, but not at the moment.
It sounds like there already is a future. As a sense of 5-year future, you're selling a 5-year future at the moment.
Can you just repeat? Do you mind repeating that for the people
Right.
listening?
So is there a future market? Well, it's not really, because you're delivering in the future, but you're accepting today's price for it. And I don't think that's really a futures market.
So I should say
Forward market. Yeah, no, we don't have a forward market. We have a number of people who have looked at all the market drivers, and they are the ones that are saying this is the price that we anticipate it will go to in 5 and 6 years' time. They're not offering, no one's offering that price. But what you can do is do your usual things, baseline, don't enter into a contract, and go through your audits and prove that as you've built it, these are the credits that you get issued. You can then sell them at that price when you've got them, or you can sit on them. You don't have to sell them until you are ready. So if you think that next month the price is going to jump significantly, you might consider selling next month.
Thank you. I know we have a couple of questions back here. We just have a couple of questions that have come in through Zoom as well. So we might address these and then we'll come back to you guys if that's okay. So Annette has said there is a different method available under the ERF where landholders can generate credits from SOC based on default values, no expensive measurements required. What do you think about the default method as an alternative, easier, cheaper approach?
We deliberately chose the measurement-based method because models are based on assumptions, and coming from the point of view of a scientist, there's a lot of work yet to be done on soil health and soil carbon. It's in its very early stages, and so default value to me is guessing. I mean, probably get a lot of arguments from people on that, but so we deliberately chose a measurement-based method. Measure it now, measure it later. You know, that's quantitative. So I've got nothing against models, but I think we've got a long way to go. That's my own personal opinion.
And can I just add one important part to that, and that is if you take the default model you get paid bugger all. So if you're going to do this, do it right from the beginning. Yeah, it's questionable on what you're going to get back.
Thank you. Okay, just I can see Justin and Leith have put a couple of more questions in. We might just get to Casey's and then to the 2 questions in the room. And if we have time, we'll circle back to you, Justin and Leith. Casey, are there specific laboratories that must be used for samples? Is there a test purely for carbon? And what is the approximate cost? What happens in the event that carbon declines instead of increasing?
So I'll answer the first few questions. Not to my knowledge, there isn't. We do our soil testing through EAL at Southern Cross University, so big shout out to those guys. There are another, so Australian National Association of Testing, National Australian Testing Association accredited lab, and it's a carbon test. I think is about $40 a pot for soil carbon. I think they cover bulk density in that too. Hopefully that answers that question. I'll hand over to consultants to talk about what happens if your carbon declines.
This is the risks that I mentioned before. So if you enter into contracts, the devil's in the detail of the contract. And if it's a government contract, they will quite often say that what you don't deliver, you got to pay them. So even with government contracts, don't accept them. You can put in clauses and take out clauses. And the reason why you should never accept a clause from the government that has it, the government's got the world's most expensive insurance scheme on this. When we talk about you getting 122 credits per hectare, well, you're in fact entitled to 165 credits per hectare, but the government is taking 25% off you to pay for all the things that go wrong. So if you're good in this area, you're paying for all the bad ones that can't deliver. It's an unfortunate part of the system.
Just add something to that. Back to, I can't remember, I don't know your name, but on the farm management plan, Charles, is it? On the farm management plan, one of my concerns with the farm management plan, it's a great thing, but I'm always nervous that the farmer's not going to stick to it and go backwards. And we've had, when we've started in this game, things like that happened. You know, say a drought came, the price of beef went up. So instead of doing rotational grazing, just eat everything in sight, you know. So, you know, you've got to really, so when I'm drawing up a farm management strategy or plan, I work with a farmer, I work with his agronomist, and we've really got to agree, you know, and not change our mind, because, yeah.
But I think the challenge is
Yeah.
the fact that it requires a big change in practice.
Yes.
In some respects,
Yeah.
it may be very hard to identify a change that
Yep.
is commercially viable. It may be just trying to identify changes to the box.
Yes.
To say that we are making a change. In New England,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I think that may be the challenge.
So what we try and do in the farm management plan is leave room for the farmer to, because it's a real world and farming is not set in concrete, you know, it's not widgets, it's not boxes and things, it's not accounting. You're dealing with so many variables, weather, markets, everything else. So we try and design into the farm management strategy flexibility so that if you stick to that additionality, say gypsum, you're not stuffed up on the rest, okay? And that's the art of a farm management plan. Yeah.
Graham, I know you have a question. There's just 2 back here and then we'll come to you.
Thank you. So I've got 3 comments. I guess, Milton, that with the rain, it'll be now easier to do the sampling. Right. Right. The other thing is that if you register for the project, can you get your baseline sampling done over a number of years? Because you might think that that's an easier way to afford it all.
Sorry, but people on Zoom can't hear if we don't.
There is, you want to get the two things done as quickly as you can, the registration and the baseline. The baseline also comes with it, the audit, because that's got to establish sorry? You've got to get those done as quickly as you can. If you wanted to do it piecemeal, you could do it maybe carbon estimation area at a time. So you might divide your farm in a third, only do the baseline on that. But you really want to get it all done as quickly as you can, therefore, because if your carbon's going up on your other paddocks that's not in the carbon estimation area, you're losing.
So I think this will answer one of the next questions up here as well. So you've got 4 weeks from the start of the baseline activity to finish it. Is the other thing that's regulated. So as soon as you start it, you need to get it. Well, the consultant and the sampler need to get it done within 4 weeks. And the other point was, and I noticed there's a question up here on Zoom about the cost. So initial baselining, and I think the consultancy fees vary. It depends if your consultant is going to take a percentage of the end piece. It's usually between $10,000 to $20,000 for the initial audit to be undertaken, depending on the property. So that would, my guess is that it'll be between 300 and 1,000 hectare property, maybe more if you had a larger property and more sampling required. Because there are a significant amount of samples that need to be taken over the area. You've got all the consulting fees to actually build that carbon estimation area, and then all of the work, as Greg alluded to, around building that farm management plan and working with the farmer. So that's the rough 10 to 20K to get set up, and then ongoing costs throughout the project for the ongoing audits and checks and, you know, updates to the baselining activity. Is that about fair? That's, you know, I think through the life of an audit, if you are just paying without that, without giving a consultant, you know, pure, you know, 5, 10, 20%, you'd probably be looking at 50 to 80K through the life of a carbon project to be put towards that, the doing, you know, sampling, project management, et cetera, et cetera. But it's worth it.
Today we've talked about in the soil stuff, and what about above the soil, like vegetation? Is that something worth exploring? And is the carbon percent able to be sequestered related to the rainfall of the area? So like more arid areas, will they slower to get carbon build up versus here?
There are other carbon schemes, not just soil. So you got trees and vegetation comes into it because they measure it these days by canopy cover. So there's that aspects of it. Rainfall is critical. So if you've got lots of rainfall, it's a lot easier to build carbon. You know, if you've got 250, 300 mils of rain a year, our advice to you would be, well, that's marginal. That's hard work, and you got to be lucky. And I would say no on that.
You just got to remember that when I originally said about the carbon, there's only one carbon pump, and that's a plant. It's the only thing that takes CO2 out. So if it's not happy, it's not taking CO2 out. So, you know, you just use the plant as a guide. If the plant's happy, you're going. It's a carbon pump, solar powered carbon pump, okay?
So we might make this the last question given the time. Graham?
Question not necessarily to anyone in particular, but I'm just curious as to how the ATO handles, so if it's every sort of 5 years or every whatever, I'm assuming it's not counted as primary production, but is it, how's that go? Yeah, from a tax point of view.
carbon credits are a financial commodity. So if you're selling them, tax office is going to come knocking on your door saying, you know, this is added onto your annual income. But with primary producers, you know, the government has means of, you can average your income through a number of ways. You have to apply that to it, but it's certainly taxable. It's not tax-free.
Norm, just one last quick question. Would you mind repeating the dollar estimates for the 1% carbon increase per land unit?
Well, based on a 1% increase, that is 122 credits per hectare. So currently you could get around $15, $16. There's an auction next month, but you've got to be registered to enter that. If you were to take that price and multiply it by 1,000 hectares, that gives you about a 1.8 million net. That's taking off the costs of audits and doing everything else. So if you took $20, then it's going to be a 2.3 million net. And it's a once-off, so you don't get it every year. So if it was $25, then it's a 2.9 million net. And if you get 30, then you're looking at around 3.5 million net on 1,000 hectares. So I think that might answer the question.
Okay, well, given the time, I still have more questions. I'm sure there's a fair few that also do. We will have to wrap it up here. Greg, Norman, Milton, Sam, thank you. That was just so interesting and informative. So just a big round of applause for our speakers, please. We have some biscuits and tea and coffee in the lobby. If anyone would like to stick around, have a conversation, approach any of our presenters with any more questions or discussions. And thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate the turnout. Hopefully you've found this of interest. This has been recorded, so if you'd like to re-listen to it, just feel free to contact me through the details that you used to, or contact the SRI through the SRI website. Just get in touch and we can send you the link. Thank you again.